Today, I want to share a story not just about survival, but about resilience, hope, and the power of unconditional love. Somewhere in the cold silence of a back alley, a paralyzed German shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old, was left discarded, immobile, and forgotten. His legs didn't move. His eyes were wide with confusion. People passed, but no one stopped, until one did. A volunteer from a local rescue saw something no one else did. A spark, a little wag of the tail, a fight to live. He was rushed to the vet. Diagnosed with a spinal injury. The prognosis: he may never walk. The advice: put him down. But the rescue team said no. They raised funds, built a custom wheelchair, and named him Hero, because that's what he would become. Hero rolled into his new life with determination. He learned to use his wheels, not as a limitation but as wings, and when he visited his first children's hospital, every child smiled, some cried. Not out of sadness, but out of inspiration. This dog, once deemed broken, now brings comfort to children in wheelchairs. He doesn't walk, but he runs into their hearts. Every time. Hero reminds us, being different doesn't mean being less. His life is proof that love, purpose, and joy can come rolling in, even when it seems all hope is lost. In the early hours of a quiet morning, beneath the rusted frame of a broken fence, and surrounded by discarded cans and torn garbage bags, lay a tiny German shepherd puppy. His body was frail, trembling, and most heartbreakingly still. His back legs didn't move. Every attempt to lift his little torso only ended in a collapse. His breathing was shallow. His fur was matted with dirt and blood. He had no collar, no name, and no one. This wasn't just a case of neglect. It was abandonment at its cruelest. Whoever had left him there had made a conscious choice. They saw his paralyzed legs, likely the result of a spinal injury, possibly from abuse or a car accident, and decided he wasn't worth saving. Rather than bring him to a vet or even a shelter, they dumped him like trash, believing he would either die quietly or be forgotten entirely. And for hours, maybe days, that almost became true. The world around him kept moving. People walked past. Cars drove by. Life continued. But for that tiny, immobile soul, time stood still. He couldn't cry for help. He couldn't crawl for food or water. The cement beneath him grew colder. The air heavier. Hunger gnawed at his stomach. Flies began to swarm his hind legs. And yet in his eyes, there was still something alive. A glimmer. A silent plea. This is the harsh reality so many abandoned animals face, especially those with visible injuries or disabilities. They're deemed useless, a burden, or too expensive to save, and so they're left, alone, helpless, invisible. But that's what makes this moment so powerful. The depth of this puppy's despair, the silence of his suffering, set the stage for one of the most heart-stirring transformations you'll ever witness. As the world passed him by, and hope began to flicker like a dying flame, a woman in a tattered rescue van came rolling slowly down that alley, looking not for miracles, but for strays. She was part of a small, underfunded local rescue group that made daily rounds through forgotten neighborhoods, hoping to find dogs dumped like yesterday's waste. She had seen many heartbreaking sights over the years, but nothing prepared her for what she saw that day. At first, she thought the puppy was already gone. His tiny frame was so still, so lifeless, she hesitated to even approach. But something told her to check. Perhaps the subtle lift of a chest, trying to breathe, perhaps intuition, or perhaps destiny. She knelt down beside the puppy, heart pounding, and as her fingers brushed his fur, his eyes slowly opened, clouded with pain but conscious. Then his tail wagged, just once, just enough. Enough to say, "I'm still here." That tiny movement shattered the wall between life and death. In that moment, she didn't see a burden. She didn't see a vet bill or a broken spine or an impossible case. She saw a soul. She carefully lifted his fragile body, wrapped him in a blanket from her van, and whispered, "I've got you now." Those 5 words became a promise, a lifeline, a beginning. This wasn't a celebrity rescue. No camera crew followed her. There was no fundraiser waiting. No social media page ready to go viral. She didn't know how she'd afford the treatment or if he'd survive the night. But still, she acted. Because real compassion doesn't calculate convenience. It doesn't ask what's easy or affordable. It just shows up. It sees value where others see nothing. It chooses love in a world that so often chooses indifference. Her decision, her single moment of empathy, became the first domino to fall in a series of miracles. Without it, the world would have never met Hero. Without it, his story would have ended quietly, painfully, and alone. But because of her, the world was about to witness the rise of a legend with 4 wheels and a heart of gold. Once the puppy was safely in her arms, the rescue worker rushed him to the nearest veterinary clinic, his tiny body trembling beneath the blanket. Every bump in the road made him wince, but he didn't whimper. He was silent, not from strength, but from exhaustion. When they arrived, the vet team carried him in gently, laying him on a sterile metal table under bright, unforgiving lights. Tests began immediately. Blood work, X-rays, reflex checks. Hours passed in tense silence. Finally, the diagnosis came. The puppy had suffered a serious spinal cord injury, likely traumatic, perhaps from a car or blunt force trauma. His back legs were completely non-responsive. The nerves were damaged beyond repair. There was no infection, no disease, just irreversible paralysis from the waist down. The words that follow were clinical, cold, final. Hay will never walk again. And then came the recommendation, the one that rescue workers hear far too often when dealing with disabled animals: you should consider euthanasia. It was delivered gently, even kindly, by a well-meaning professional. He won't have a good quality of life, they said. He'll suffer, they warned. It's the humane thing to do, they added. The rescue worker nodded politely, but inside her heart was a storm. How could they measure this puppy's potential by what his legs couldn't do? How could they define the value of his life based solely on his diagnosis? She remembered the flicker in his eyes, that brave tail wag, his determination to hold on. What the vet saw was the medical reality, clear, black, and white by the book. But what she saw was something else entirely, the emotional truth, the spirit, the will. The silent scream to live, even when the body couldn't obey. And so she said no. No to the needle. No to the easy way out. No to the belief that a broken body meant a broken life. This moment, where the sterile world of medicine collided with the warm pulse of hope, defined everything that followed. It marked a choice that few dare to make, to bet on life when others only see limits, to believe in a story that hadn't yet been written, to look past the X-rays and see the soul. Because the truth is, miracles don't always begin in laboratories. They begin in hearts. The decision was made. The vet's verdict had been heard and respectfully declined. The puppy, now named Hero, wasn't going to be put down. Not today. Not ever. Not while he still had that sparkle in his eyes. But saying no was just the beginning. The real journey, the uphill battle, was just starting. Hero was discharged from the clinic paralyzed and fragile, but very much alive. The rescue team took him in like family. With that choice came the weight of responsibility, emotional, financial, and physical. He couldn't walk. He couldn't relieve himself without assistance. He couldn't eat properly on his own. Every moment of care demanded effort, time, and love, but they didn't flinch. Each day began with therapy. Gentle massages along his spine, assisted stretches of his tiny hind legs, hydrotherapy sessions where his upper body floated in warm water, and volunteers helped him paddle gently with his front paws. He couldn't move much, but he never gave up trying. And then came the wheelchair. It wasn't bought from a big company. They couldn't afford that. Instead, they reached out to their online community, people who had followed their rescues before. Donations began to trickle in, 5, 10, 20, enough slowly to fund a custom cart. When it finally arrived, a lightweight aluminum frame with rubber wheels and padded supports, they gently placed Hero into it. For the first time in his life, he wasn't dragging his legs behind him. He was upright, balanced, supported. At first, he stood frozen, unsure of what to do. But then, he moved. One small push, then another, and another. His ears perked up, his tail swayed, and just like that, Hero was rolling. He wasn't fast, he wasn't graceful, but he was moving forward. Every day from that point was a little better than the last. He learned to eat on his own again. He learned to bark joyfully when visitors arrived. He learned how to play, wheeling in circles with other dogs, fearless and full of joy. But more than all that, he reminded the rescue team why they do what they do. Because giving up is easy, it's practical. It's what most people expect when the odds are stacked so high. But refusing to give up, that takes courage. It takes vision. It takes love that doesn't quit when things get hard. They refused to let his diagnosis be his destiny. They chose to see beyond the broken body and into the beating heart. They chose to fight when others would fold. And Hero, he chose to live. And now look at him. Hero, the once abandoned, paralyzed puppy, rolls into children's hospitals with a spark in his eyes and a smile on his face. Kids in wheelchairs see him and light up. They don't see a dog with a disability. They see someone just like them, brave, different, and full of life. Some children reach out to touch him. Some just stare, silent but awestruck. Others cry, not from sadness, but from a strange kind of healing. Because in Hero, they see a survivor, a fighter, a friend. He doesn't speak their language, but he understands their hearts. And with every wag of his tail, every turn of his wheels, he tells them, you are not broken. You are unstoppable. Hero may never walk on four legs, but he moves people in ways no one else can. His story has become more than a rescue tale. It's a symbol, a message to every person, young or old, who's ever been told they weren't enough. He was left to die. But because someone chose love over convenience, because people refused to give up, because hope was louder than fear, he now lives a life with purpose, joy, and impact. Hero didn't just survive, he transformed. So let his journey be a reminder to all of us sometimes the strongest souls roll on wheels, and sometimes the ones the world casts aside become the ones who change it. Never underestimate the power of compassion. Never assume someone's story is over just because they're down. Because sometimes those who fall the hardest rise the highest, and sometimes those who can't walk still lead us where we need to go.